Today I want to take a look at a technically impressive game with a unique and great atmosphere, Unreal. When you think of Unreal, you usually think of this, the 1998 first-person shooter by Epic. But 8 years earlier, in 1990, Ubisoft released a very different game that, very much like its younger namesake, defined how 3D graphics should look. Unreal manages to weave an engrossing plot even before you start up the game, as the manual tells the entire backstory. Well, in summary, it's actually a pretty simple plot. The evil master of darkness, called Polymorph, kidnaps your girlfriend Isolde. You are Artaban, and together with your trusty dragon Dracus, you set off to rescue her. But this plot is very well and colorfully written, and sets the mood for the game perfectly. Sadly, the game itself doesn't tell you anything about this. The manual even continues the plot with little story snippets that are supposed to be read between the chapters of the game. The game starts up with a masterfully digitized version of the wonderful box art and the first taste of the atmospheric music the game features. And once you bring yourself to press your fire button and go on, you are presented with your first taste of the Amiga's own Unreal Engine. An awesome title sequence with ray tracing balls accompanied by another beautiful music track. By now you might have noticed that I like Unreal's music. While it is in essence nothing spectacular, it just works. This is also where you have to choose between music and, if you have at least 1 MB RAM, sound effects, as the game cannot give you both. While the sound effects are really well done with all sorts of ambient noises, I personally like to play with music, as in my opinion it just adds more to the atmosphere of the game. With the press of the fire button, the game starts with the first 3D dragon flying level. These 3D levels look impressive and play smoothly, but they're not without their problems. Controlling is not as exact as you might think, and quite often it may look like you got past an obstacle, only to have the game tell you hit something. A simple hit will only deduct a few hit points. A crash, however, will stop your flight, cost quite a few hit points, and will decrease your weapon power. The levels move pretty fast, so you need quick reflexes, but the game helps you with flashing arrows and left-right messages. The thing is, these 3D levels are, in my opinion, too long. I think they get kind of boring. Even worse, there are 5 of these levels, while there are only 3 2D levels. These 2D levels play like a traditional platforming hack and slash mix, and look gorgeous. In fact, they are much more playable than the 3D flying levels, and in my opinion they look better too. But they are technically less impressive, of course. You can enhance your sword by letting it touch fire, which will make it noticeably stronger. Certain fires even add a helpful fireball shooting function to your sword. Besides defeating the various monsters Unreal throws at you, there are some minor puzzles and some jumping parts which require almost perfect timing. Unlike other games, Unreal doesn't have lives, but just like in the 3D levels, hit points. Of course, a drop down a chasm or into water costs more than a simple hit by a monster. One interesting feature the game has is, once you lose all your hit points, the game is not necessarily over. Instead, you are presented with the question whether you want to switch to training mode. Doing so will give you, in essence, infinite hit points. The game still deducts them, but it won't end once you reach 0 and just lets you continue playing. This mode is bought by removing both the scoring system and the save feature. While in training mode, you won't be able to set a new high score or save your game, which is otherwise possible between each chapter. But this gives you the possibility to experience the game anyway and, naturally, to train for the real game. Speaking of the real game, Unreal has also been ported to the Atari ST and to MS-DOS. But as far as I have seen, both versions are quite clearly inferior to the Amiga version. Since I don't have an Atari ST, I cannot show you that version. But from screenshots I've seen, it looks a lot like the DOS version. I can only guess, but I think it could be a direct conversion of the Atari ST game. Let's take a look at the game PCs got in 1991. It does start promising with a decent conversion of the title screen and the ad-lib rendition of the title theme. But after pressing space, it goes downhill fast. Not only is there no flying balls or lava menu/credit sequence, no. The game starts with the Winter Dragonflying stage, which in the Amiga version comes after the Forest 3D level, the Swamp 2D level and the River 3D level, skipping 3 of 8 chapters. That's more than a third of the entire game. Technically, it's not all that impressive as well. The 3D levels are pixelated and choppy. Sure, a faster PC makes the game run faster, but it doesn't become smoother. In comparison to the Amiga version, it looks rather sad, and really, the graphics don't help to build up the atmosphere that is one of the strongest points in the Amiga version. The 2D levels don't fare much better. While obviously using VGA, they look dull and colorless and lack all animations. Artaban, our main character, even looks different, but at least he has a new move. While jumping, he can now perform a downward swipe, which would come in handy if the game would be controllable. The screen is not even scrolling. Instead, the screen just jumps ahead once you get near the edge. Not only pauses the game for a split second each time this happens, you every so often walk or jump right into a monster or other obstacle that hurts you. Honestly, I think it's a rather shoddy port, and I feel sad for the people who bought this version. The same level back on the Amiga has wonderful graphics, with nice weather effects. In fact, from this level on, the wind becomes a stronger force against progression, adding another element you have to deal with. But the 2D portions do have their problems as well. For one, that downward swipe the DOS version has would have been very helpful. And if you're standing directly in front of an obstacle, you can no longer jump forward and have to go back a couple of steps. This can be annoying, especially if you desperately try to flee from one of the never-ending monster spawn points. And yes, some of the jumping parts can be rather frustrating. But these are really all the bad things of the 2D levels. As I said earlier, there are only 3 such 2D levels, each of them consisting of multiple stages, and 5 3D levels. As you undoubtedly realize, Unreal is a rather short game, taking about 40 minutes from start to finish. In my opinion, the game would have benefited immensely from a few more 2D stages. So, Unreal is certainly not a flawless masterpiece, but still, I think the game is awesome in its own way, and I would even go so far to call it a piece of art on the Amiga. So even after all the flaws the game has, I still recommend it. And I think it's one of these games you just have to have played if you own an Amiga system.